Welcome to the Indiana History Project. I'm the old history hunter, Norm Taylor. Good to have you along with us. Folks, if you're watching this today, it isn't a rerun. Now, I mean, I know all summer here in the 2012, that I was on reruns like Andy Griffith. And by the way, guys, when I mentioned Andy Griffith, we lost Andy Griffith here recently.
Yeah,
I mean, my goodness, you're just talking about somebody we grew up with. I mean, everybody knew who Andy Griffith was.
Yep.
And here we just lost him, and we hate to hear that. One of the greatest shows to me was the Andy Griffith Show.
Oh, absolutely.
I loved it. I hate to hear that Andy left us, but that happens. And but anyway, folks, you've been seeing my reruns, and I know you guys have been saying, when are the new shows? If you're watching this, this is a new show. It's not a rerun. This is the real thing. And so we're glad to have you along with us. And this is really kind of the starting of the 6th season of the Indiana History Project, and we're going into the 6th year. And so I think you're going to be excited about the shows that we're going to have in these next few weeks and months coming up ahead. I mean, we've got some great guests coming your way and some great shows. And starting off, you are going to love these next 3 shows, I guarantee you. And tell everybody that, hey, Norm's not in reruns. It's real this time. So, and get everybody back around. By those pictures that you got to see at the beginning of the program, if you didn't know what this program is about, in fact, the next 3 programs are about, well, by those pictures, which I'm sure you probably do have, then I'm going to throw these out to you. In fact, I'm going to see if I can stump my panelists here.
All right.
Hey, what was that show that they tried to, a long time ago, folks, they tried to stump the panelists? Come on, go back to Tell the Truth, or you remember they would throw the Kitty Carlisle. Well, come on, guys. You got to look at this. My guys, look at that.
Remember.
They've already got that look at it.
Well, we're not
you
old
guys
enough.
remember?
Yeah, you're old
you guys
enough.
remember Kitty Carlisle, don't you?
Yeah,
folks out there, it's not Let's Make a Deal. It's not. It's not The Price is Right. It was, I think, was it Truth or Consequence?
To tell the truth. There was to
well,
tell
I'm getting a message from beyond. What is this? What's my line? I heard the voice again. Okay, what's my line? That was with Kitty Carlisle and the bunch, yeah. And so anyway, I'm going to say, actually I'm not going to be able to stump these guys, but if you still don't know what this program's about, you will here in just a few moments. If I throw these terms out to you, corn squeezins, hillbilly pop, Mountain Dew, mule kick, radiator whiskey, or red eye, or sugar whiskey, or white dog, Everclear. Anybody getting an idea out there? I can see everybody shaking their head out there. I can't see you, but I can see that you're probably doing it. White lightning, tiger sweat, or I love this one, sweet spirits of cats a fighting. I mean, that's my favorite one right there. I mean, I love Pop Skull. I love that one, but that sweet spirits of cats a fighting, well, then you'll know that we're going to be talking about moonshine. In fact, the name of these shows is The History of Moonshining in Southern Indiana. So in order to just keep, there's other names we could have given this, but in order to we're going to just use the term moonshine, I think, for the 3 shows, because everybody kind of knows what we're talking about with that. But even though that I like that sweet spirits of cats a fighting, that has been one of my favorites. But anyway, the moonshine is what we're going to use. And folks, whenever I started researching this, I found out that they would indeed be good shows to do, because I found out that moonshining is really woven into our local fabric of here in Southern Indiana. It is into our lore. I met through this research some of the most interesting characters that I'm never going to have a chance to meet. But I mean, some people that are fascinating in our life. And I came to the conclusion is that we are losing some of these great stories of happening before even Prohibition and the Great Depression. Even before that, but certainly during that time and after that, we're losing some of these great stories that everybody that I talked to, they all knew about some moonshiners. I mean, they talked about their grandfathers, their great-grandfathers, and it seemed like most people I talked to, they had a story. They said, yeah, I remember Grandpa talking about this story and that story. And this has been a part of our of our historical fabric around here. I mean, and folks, the stories that you're going to hear in these next 3 shows, I can't even validate that they're even true. I mean, some of them, hopefully, we've tried to research them, and some of them are made true. Some of them may be just good old stories.
Well, some of the best stories aren't.
Yeah, but folks, but some of these stories, they need to be preserved, whether it's folklore or whether it's and there's certainly a lot of these, there's some truth to them. But the fact is that moonshining had an impact not only in our local history, but it had an impact on the history of our great country.
Absolutely.
And so that's why we are doing these shows. The history of moonshining in southern Indiana. Randy Greene. Randy, the co-host, good to have you again, my friend.
Good to see you, Norm.
Whenever I see you right across my table, then I know we're going to have some kind of subject that no one else will come on the show and do with me.
Well, it's always interesting, Norm. It's always interesting.
Well, Randy, we did the on the Italian immigrant problem back and the Reed Station. That was a great. I mean, still I have people that have talked about that show. I didn't even know there was a Reed Station that was even there.
When I was in my sociology classes, I'll play parts of that show to show the tensions that were then compared to the tensions that people make so much of now. Yeah. It's nothing compared to what they saw back then.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, burning houses down, killing people because they're Italian.
Right.
Yeah. It's not something that we see, nowadays.
And it's right here in our county.
Yeah,
it was right here in our county. And this happened. This was something that got the attention of the whole nation, and other nations got involved with that. And it happened just right there near Oleitic in that little town of Reed Station. And so you did that one over there. You did the KKK show with me, and well, we sure got a lot of response on that one.
Yes, we did.
And I'm still getting responses on that one. And we're still around.
Yeah, and we're still here.
So these kind of shows, I can't. If I know that I can't get anybody else, I know I can get Randy. So.
Well, this is. I mean, for me, this involves economics and history.
It is.
So that's part of what I teach. So that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, folks, and someone who's been watching the show for a long time, that you know that Randy. You know a little bit about Randy. Randy is a social studies teacher at Brownstown High School, and a good one. Used to teach here in the North Lawrence school system, and now. They've got him over Jackson County, but we've been friends for a while, and a common love of history. And Randy, it's always good having you, buddy.
Thank you.
On the program. I'm looking forward to doing these shows with you. Also, a new friend of mine is Roy Hensen. Ron, good to have you with it.
Glad to be here.
Ron and I and my wife, we all went history hunting one Sunday afternoon around the Williams area. Just had a blast.
It was enjoyable.
It was, and we got into some places and got to see some things, and hopefully we're going to do that again.
We will.
Ron, you're a local boy, aren't you?
Yep.
Okay. And when I'm thinking, well, who can I get to come on and talk about moonshining? Well, everybody says, well, Ron Hensen, why? He knows everything about moonshining. Be sure to get Ron on the show. I don't know how they want to interpret that.
I think they knew Dad took me to all of them.
Ron's going to talk about some personal stories about moonshining in good old southern Indiana. And so I know you're going to enjoy that. In fact, all these shows, we're going to have people with personal experiences about the stories they've heard about moonshining. We got a guest coming on that his father was a revenuer. Boy, he'll be interesting. Another one that was a barber in the area for over 40 years, and he's heard some stories. We got some great people coming on, and we want to give that personal aspect. And we want you as a community to join in. Like in all my other shows, if you remember or you've heard a story about moonshining in this area, you can get on the Indiana History Project on Facebook, like it, and then send me your story. I'll be glad to use it probably when we do our third show on the subject. So get on Indiana History Project, or the information at the end of the show, send me an email, phone me, something, but say, hey, I've got a great story for you. And the third show, I want to share about a lot of the different local stories. And that's what's fun, is getting to hear the local stories, Randy. That's what's great about this. Randy,
it's all about the people.
It's all about the people. And, we take a great pride in our community. We love southern Indiana. All three of us do. It's not only a beautiful place, but I believe they're great people. And there are sure a lot of great stories, and especially when you get to moonshining.
Some of the best storytellers you'll ever meet. Southern Indiana.
Yes.
That's right. I agree with you right
there. The bad thing about it is we've lost a bunch of them.
Yeah.
I wish there's some of them we could have talked to that's passed on. Because they could tell stories like you couldn't believe.
And you're exactly right. And the reason why we're doing this show, and like I stated earlier, is that we are losing these people. Yep. We're losing these stories. When these people pass, these stories are going with them. And these stories, I think you all agree by the time we've done these 3 shows, they need to be preserved. Yep. And that's what we're attempting to do today. Randy, when I started researching moonshining, one person referred to moonshine making as the 2nd oldest profession. Now, it's a family show, but I think we all know what we've always heard is the 1st oldest profession. But
sandal making.
Sandal making.
Right? Yeah. Okay. That's what my mom always told me.
Okay, well, she was probably right. We're not going to argue
a new name for
it. But the 2nd oldest profession, as one said it. And I found out that indeed, the making of moonshine goes even way back, even 1,000 years before the birth of Christ, that it was practiced in Asia. We have even records of that, even that far back, of moonshine making. 500 years before Christ was born, they had stills in Greece.
Oh, yeah.
500 years before. Wow. So we're going way back. By 1620, just 13 years after the Jamestown settlement, the colonists were already making moonshine.
Oh, absolutely.
And you were telling me about something about the early part of this, about the colonists, a little bit earlier.
Right. Even in some of the... Georgia was the first colony that outlawed alcohol there, that gave the first prohibition. And he was very specific in all the different names that it could be called and said none of these will be consumed or sold in the colony of Georgia. Well, what had happened there was... what happened even later when we get to our Prohibition era and when we get to local prohibition here in Indiana and different communities and blue laws, is that it all started with the Protestant faith, is that was wrong. The rural Protestants would tell you that alcohol only leads to evil, no good can come of alcohol. So they felt to keep their communities pure, the only way they could do that is stop everybody from drinking. Well, the problem was you have all this corn left over. And here in southern Indiana, when it was the Indiana Territory, the farther south you got, the bigger wine producers we were. So we had grapes, we had wine, we had corn, we had potatoes, we had everything. And when you have all that left over, you don't waste anything. Nope. So what are you going to make with it?
Yeah,
it'll keep.
It goes way back. And you're starting to get into something I want to discuss before we get to Ron, is that the reasons why people did make moonshine.
Oh, yeah.
And so you're kind of touching on that a little bit right there. But the people that came from England and Germany and the Scottish and the Irish, they all brought over their tradition of making moonshine when they moved into Virginia. And so this was carried over from the old country and moonshine making. So again, this goes way back.
Well, a lot of it was, again, the quality of water that they had available then, is that you could cut that with water and it wouldn't hurt you. Like the water wouldn't hurt you, or you could always have something, you would always have something to drink there, something to keep you warm at night. In fact, the men in these areas that came from these countries that you mentioned, the men believed that alcohol was vital to men's health, not to women's health, to men's health.
It was just a men's health.
It was men's health, yes.
It wasn't going to help a woman.
No, it would not help a woman in any way.
Right. I was always told it thinned her blood.
Tender blood, okay. We had, once I started looking into it, some interesting names started cropping up because, again, moonshining started to affect pretty early the way that our history, in many ways, in which we're going to get into now, because we feel like that if we're going to talk about moonshining in southern Indiana, especially around the Prohibition years and all that, we got to give you some background. Well, William Penn, back as early as 1683 in Pennsylvania, was already brewing. That's a name that is going to sound familiar to people, William Penn. How many of you have heard of George Washington, first president of the United States? He was known for making some good moonshine. In fact, today, I just came back.
They took great pride in it. It was a matter of pride.
And they said that George Washington's was the best. I've heard that in there. In fact, today, they still make there. I just got back from New York and was talking to a guy about that. It's very expensive, but they still do make from his recipe of George Washington,
So how was
and they
it?
sell it around there somewhere.
Yeah, how was it?
No, I didn't get there, guys. But that's what I hear. George Washington, again, the first president. He made evidently some pretty good moonshine. Thomas Jefferson, I think we've all heard about him. He also indulged in some moonshining.
He was also, Thomas Jefferson was big into winemaking from his years in Paris.
Okay.
Is that he learned French winemaking there and brought it back here when he came back to the United States from his stint there.
Yeah. So he had some experience in it. So we could go into others as well, but it seems like then, whenever American rum started growing as a good enterprise, and there was money starting to be made, then all of a sudden that got the attention of England. And so what does England do? England say, well, now listen, you guys aren't just going to profit from this. Somehow we're going to profit from this. So back in about 1733, England, in order to cut into this, passed the Molasses Act. And again, this was primarily because of the making of moonshine. It was a tax on molasses because it was used as early as 1733. And you can even go into the Sugar Act, was a British, of 1764. Again, that was to cut into the moonshining trade. So there was some money already, this early in our history. There are already two taxes that have been formed because of the moonshine trade.
Well, it was particularly difficult for these people because the Crown had left us alone for so long that they hadn't done any taxes. They had let us go. We had grown up wild and free here in the United States, and then all of a sudden, tax say, oh, hey, let's remember those colonies. We should start making some money off of them. So they started finding ways to hit them hard, and the people were very upset at these. They were already mad at the Crown, but it made them even more upset because they felt it was going after the common man, because a rich man, if alcohol costs him more, he can still afford it. So they felt it was going after the little guy. It was going after the poor man, the guy that couldn't afford it, but that needed it in his house, or wanted it in his house.
And we're dancing all around. Again, one of the reasons why that moonshining even came in existence, we're dancing it. I still want to delay that a little bit later, but we're itching to get to that. But what I read is that they needed a good limestone type of water, a good cool water, a good limestone type of water, which was in western Pennsylvania. It was there, and Kentucky and Tennessee and Virginia and North Carolina. These had the good limestone water, and also southern Indiana. So it also influenced very early on those that were into the moonshine trade. Not only like the growing tensions, like Randy had mentioned about the Molasses Act and the Sugar Act when the British put this upon the colonies, but people needed to get somewhere where there was this limestone water. And so again, you had that in Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, in fact, and in southern Indiana. So again, when you think of moonshining, you do think of those states, Kentucky, Tennessee, and it was very prevalent here in southern Indiana as well. Also, you need an abundance of corn later, and again, we get right back to the farming, the rural communities there. So people started heading to places where you had those two sources.
The promised land.
And so you had a migration again to western Pennsylvania, to Tennessee. Again, some people actually moved because of the moonshining trade. So part of the immigration, even of our country, was because of moonshining. That's kind of interesting. George Washington, bless his heart, needed to pay for the debts of the Revolutionary War. Money just doesn't grow on trees. So in 1791, he put a tax on distillers, which led to 1794, the Whiskey Rebellion. Again, this has to be mentioned right now. I don't know if you've read too much about the Whiskey Rebellion, but
you were there, weren't you?
Yes, I was. In fact, I remember when George Washington troops came. No, I was on the other side. I was part of George Washington troops. But But you know, they occupied Pittsburgh at this time. I mean, the government was going after these distillers that wasn't paying their taxes, and they were saying, we're not going to pay the taxes to our government on this. So they took up arms. This had the potential of being a very serious situation, especially in Pennsylvania. Because again, the migration of those that wanted to make moonshine started heading west into Pennsylvania. And so there again, they went after them, and there were some people that saying, we aren't going to pay the tax, and they took up arms, and it became a very serious situation where George Washington actually called in troops, the Whiskey Rebellion, in order to stop this rebellion, the Whiskey Rebellion, 1794.
Sending the troops in.
Yeah, and he did. So again, showing how moonshining, again, how it affected and how it influenced even the history of our country. Again, the Molasses Act, the Sugar Act, the whiskey tax to pay for the Revolutionary War that led to the Whiskey Rebellion. I mean, this was already a major thing that is already starting to formulate some of our country once you really start to research it. Again, in 1814, and again, for those of you that know history, they wanted to help pay for the War of 1812. How did they do it? You started to tax those of the distilling industry. If they were wanting to tax these folks, the Revolutionary War and up to this point of the War of 1812, there must have been money being made here.
Right, and see, since there weren't very many people out there trying to keep this, keep tally of all this, is that they would make assumptions. And that was one of the things that the farmers would get mad at, is that they would say, well, you've got 100 acres of farmland here, that is this many bushels of corn, you owe us this much tax. And the farmer says, well, half of it was destroyed and most of it went to, the grain mill, none of it did I sell to distillers, and they wouldn't take that for the answer. They wanted all the money that they could get out of that. It was a burden upon the farmer to prove that he didn't sell it to a distiller. Well, how do you prove you didn't do something? You can only prove that you did do something.
Yeah.
So they sensed that it was unfair, that it was just a blatant grab of their money, and they weren't going to put up with that.
Well, George Washington that had his hand in this trade, I guess he would have known a little bit about this. There had to be some money made, because I think he made some money in it.
Oh, everybody had a little bit of, a little bit of money in that.
That's true. I found out that when you talk around 1814 and around 1816, you're talking about the birth of our state. There seemed to be a correlation between the slavery issues in the early 1816, especially when you're talking about the birth of Indiana, and also of the temperance movement. And even early on, it seemed to be running right parallel to each other, the issue of slavery and the issue of temperance. Because in 1816, the state of Indiana made it illegal to sell alcohol on Sundays here in this state.
Did you know
and it's still to this day.
We are the only state in the country that bans beer, wine, and liquor on Sundays.
I think it's true.
There are 11 other states that ban the sale of hard liquor on Sundays, but they don't ban beer and wine.
Right.
But they ban hard liquor.
You have any idea about how many states there are, Randy?
There are 11. There are 12, including us.
Okay.
And we're the only one that bans beer, wine, and liquor on Sundays.
That you can carry out.
Yeah, we're the only ones.
Because they serve it.
Yeah, you can serve. You can as long as you serve food.
Yeah.
You can serve that, but you can't buy carry out.
And again, this is going back to 1816, when this rule was made that you couldn't sell alcohol in the state of Indiana. Back in
the states that you mentioned, the Carolinas, Tennessee, West Virginia, those were the ones that had the blue laws. These were the moonshine states.
Yeah.
Now, but see, even then, you could get it anywhere, and then people were making it cheap, making it dangerous. So then people were dying because it wasn't made correctly. So then places like Indiana started selling it as a public safety issue, not just a moral issue. It was a public safety issue or a religious issue. It was just it was public safety.
Yeah. By the way, I mentioned about one of those definitions, pulp skull. that came from pretty bad liquor. I mean, that was that's where the pop skull. I mean, it just did something to the skull. It popped the brain, I guess. But pop skull was brought, and that basically term came about during the Prohibition years when they started making again in radiators and bathtubs and everything else. Some bad liquor, moonshine got out there, and so pop skull actually came from that time there. In the Civil War, again, now notice, folks, we're trying to give you some history on the moonshine and how it affected our history of our country. The Rev War, the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and even in the Civil War, 1862, President Lincoln put a tax on whiskey.
As if he wasn't unpopular enough.
I knew somewhere along that line. I thought, oh well, that's going to, you know, he'd already been elected. He wouldn't have brought this on election year, would he?
No.
But by 1862, Lincoln put a tax on whiskey. And since I've done a lot of Civil War reenacting and been a lot of studied the Civil War a lot, I knew that whiskey was becoming a very important part of the soldiers' lives, and so it became a black market. In fact, when you talk about the black market, you're going to see in the Civil War it really started to spread. By 1863 and 1864 in the southern states, whiskey was selling. Now get a load of this. Keep in mind, folks, this is 1863 to 1864. Whiskey was selling anywhere from $50 to $60 a gallon in the southern states. Now again, 1863, $50 to $60 for a gallon. So what happened when this tax was put on by President Lincoln in the Civil War? And because the Union troops was down south, you know, I mean, the troops were everywhere, and it was becoming big business, and you had the devastation, especially of the southern economies back then. They found this as a way to make some money. I mean, and again, their economy was being devastated during the war here. Whiskey was a big, high-price item, this moonshining.
Well, for a lot of them, that was the only way to preserve their wealth. You know, there weren't local banks, and the banks that there weren't banks you could trust. You could put away whiskey, and it's going to last and get better. So you could fill up a basement or underneath your house or underneath your porch or a root cellar out back. You could fill it with that, and it was a way to preserve your wealth without, you know, having income.
Yeah.
You could take this, and you could make it, and you could make it, and you could store it aside. Now we're used to storing our wealth in banks. Then they had to store their wealth in goods. You can't keep corn down there. The rats get into it. It goes bad. You had to find a way to do it, and this was how they did it. They store up wealth.
Well, this certainly was something we're going to get into in another program. But you know how that they were hiding the moonshine. You know, later on, and this became a cat and mouse game between the government and the moonshiners. But something this become again during the Civil War, folks. Illegal moonshining just exploded. I mean, I know we're talking about, I know in the Prohibition years, when we get to that, how it was exploding again. But the Civil War, it really started, the illegal moonshining started to really explode during the Civil War, where it started to, again, there was a lot of money involved with the trade between Union and the Southern armies, and so whiskey was very, very popular to both armies during this time. Randy, I came across, when I mentioned William Penn, when I mentioned Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, I got a kick out of this story. I remember being at, my wife and I was at the Little Bighorn battlefield in Montana a few years ago, and saw where General Custer made his last stand and got surrounded by the enemies. I got a kick out of this story because I found out in the 1870s, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer was sent into the hills in Kentucky to get the moonshiners. And so I found out by doing this research on the moonshiners that General Custer, the first time that he wasn't bushwhacked wasn't at the Little Bighorn and surrounded. He was actually the hills in Kentucky. He was actually hit on several times, and he didn't have any success at all of getting through them. So by the time he got to the Little Bighorn, he knew a little bit about these surprise tactics, guerrilla tactics that was used in getting hit by the enemy, because he spent some time in the 1870s and it just didn't work.
No, that's...
I didn't know General Custer got his training in the hill looking for the moonshiners.
It's like trying to get in a land war in Asia. That's just not something you do.
Yeah.
You just don't do that.
And he found out that, I think, I wonder if General Custer decided to go out west because they were afraid they were going to send him after the moonshiners in Kentucky.
You look up in those hills and you've got to be very specialized to be able to fight in those hills. And those moonshiners up there, that was their home ground. They knew where they were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like goats.
Yeah.
What we're leading up to, folks, is that the government was waging war. Maybe is that too strong of a term?
I don't think so. When you send the troops
when I
in,
talk
you're
about
pretty
the
close.
Whiskey Rebellion, I think they're talking about. But the government started waging war on the moonshiners. So when this happened, when he sent General Custer in, Lieutenant Colonel Custer, into the hills after them, and when troops were sent into Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania, to western Pennsylvania, I'd say that the government was waging war on the moonshiners. They were after this tax money.
Well, there was a lot of, but see, there was also a lot of pressure from the temperance movement people that you have to do something about this problem. This is tearing apart our country. It's tearing apart our communities. There was a lot of pressure on the politicians that if you're seen as soft on alcohol, you won't get elected.
Yeah. So it became a real political issue.
Yeah, it was a political issue.
Yeah.
And then, I'm not sure I'm jumping too far ahead here because I think this is about the right time, that there was a guy that finally wrote an article about members of Congress that were buying whiskey from him but were voting for prohibition.
I don't doubt that.
Or that were part of the so-called temperance movement. This was before the Prohibition era, but that they were all temperance, and the guy said, there were 200 of those guys. I'd make my rounds in Congress, every time they came to town, you just walk around and, slip them a jar, Norm.
Yeah. When do we get into it? And again, this is going to be in a future show, but it's kind of hilarious how that they would do some of these pickups and how they would get the illegal moonshine into certain people's pockets and into the cars. And Randy's done a little research on the mobilization, the bootlegging part of this, on the how. They started transporting it a little bit later on. That's kind of interesting in itself.
I love that part. I love the cars.
Yeah, I knew you love the cars.
Love the cars.
And NASCAR's got a connection there, and that's interesting in itself how they used to do that. But they started to go into the hills and the woods and the caves. Again, they started having to go deeper into the mountains and to give it away from the troops and to the revenuers. And they always needed to have some cool water. So they would have always had to go near a stream. Folks, I know from past experience of doing this show that when we do those shows, you start kind of getting interested in this. Well, I would like to still find where some stills were at in the woods somewhere around here. And I've got that goal to do that. But believe me, if some of you some Saturday or Sunday afternoon want to go out still hunting, because some of you people, when you were out squirrel hunting or mushroom hunting, you may have actually run across a still, didn't even know it. You thought maybe just some garbage was thrown out there, some metal and so forth, and you may have actually come across where a still was, because there was a lot of them around here. But you had to have cool water, but they also had to be hidden. So they went into the woods and the caves and everything. Again, to get away from the government and his moonshining part. But temperance was also, we talked about this a little bit in the 1800s, that there was a temperance movement going on. They wanted to, there was a segment of our society that wanted to outlaw the temperance movement. Randy, before we get to the 18th Amendment, have you done really very much research at all on that, on the temperance movement? I know that it was growing, it was going strong even during the Civil War.
Right.
There were temperance societies and going on. Then after the Civil War, it became a very strong movement.
Some of the estimates that I saw were at the height of the temperance movement that there may have been as many as 1.5 million people that said they were part of the temperance movement. The local churches pushed it. Local governments pushed it. The KKK pushed it very, very much. And a lot of that was, the temperance movement was fueled by things like the KKK, because we've talked before when we did our KKK show, how they felt about Catholics. Well, if you get onto the eastern seaboard and you start moving in, Irish Catholics, I mean, I remember people making jokes about Irish Catholics as drunks growing up. I remember that very clearly. Well, that came from somewhere. Well, the Irish Catholics, they were making all of this moonshine. The KKK didn't like it. The local churches didn't like it. The government officials were pushed into this. And the temperance movement just swelled. It was huge at one point. And the biggest pusher was the women.
Yeah.
As they said that it was protecting motherhood. They said we have to start with the children and teach them that alcohol is bad, and in a generation there won't be anybody drinking alcohol. I think they were wrong.
Okay, so the women again, but you're right. In the temperate societies, these were mainly women,
Yeah.
right? And I guess that they, some of their husbands came home a little under the influence of moonshine at times, and this probably led to some of this. And of course, there have been a lot of evils when you talk about the association of it. I mean, some people did the alcoholism. We could go on down that line, but so the temperance movement had a great growing viability. Do you remember of any specific politicians that actually ran on the issue of temperance? Or right off the top of your head, I used to know, but
I actually looked this up not too long ago, and I don't have the numbers, but when you get into the early 1900s, maybe the 1918, 1920 election, somewhere in there, there were over 200 members of Congress that had signed that they would support the temperance movement. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're looking, now that's of course between the House and the Senate, but a lot of these guys, they said that's the only way I'm going to get elected, is if I go temperance. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, it was seen as a real evil. Now, I mean, you show guys, it's on television, it's everywhere. There's a bar or a liquor store on every other corner in most cities. Then it was something that, if you were seen drinking, it was seen as shameful. These wives that you were talking about, if somebody found out that their husband was drinking, it brought shame on their household. She would be looked down upon. The kids would be made fun of. They would be threatened by visits from the KKK because the guy was drinking.
Right.
Well, if you're going to support something by not being temperance, it was seen as supporting it. And if you supported it, you were just as bad as those people, even if you didn't drink. Yeah. So there was a lot of political pressure to get that done.
And keep in mind, we're going to get into the 18th Amendment for just a minute. It came in 1919, but when we did our study on the KKK, the example was in the early 1920s, whenever the KKK went into Springville, and they went to the horseshoe parts, and they said, guys, go home. Yeah. They were trying to shut down the horseshoe tournaments and so forth in Springville, which was known as the horseshoe capital of the world in the 1920s. Again, tell them to go home because this was a moral issue. I mean, the KKK, but remember, through our study of this, in 1925, the KKK was a great political mover and shaker in the state of Indiana. So, and they were for the temperance.
There were 165,000 members of the KKK in Indiana. In 90 of the 92 counties, they had chapters.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of the population.
Yeah.
And if they're all pushing temperance, and you want to get elected,
there's a huge voting.
That's your only choice.
The temperance societies, Randy, were successful because in 1919 the 18th Amendment was passed, and so it said it was illegal to have alcohol. So you had to start a prohibition.
It took 2 years to get that passed.
Yeah.
2 years, from December of 1918 till January of 1920, for that to finally get passed by the last state. Is that it was a contentious issue because you had a lot of people that were starting to make a lot of money. This is, of course, much later. The stigma wasn't quite as bad at this point as it was, in the mid to late 1800s, but the stigma was still there. But you had a lot of powerful people making a lot of money off alcohol.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to get it all the way through, almost 2 years.
So when it was passed in 1919, then immediately something happened. Whenever you think of prohibition, guys, what comes into your mind? Or who comes to your mind? What's one of the names that, when you think of prohibition?
I think Al Capone.
Al Capone.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of a sudden you had the Bugs Malone, you had the Al Capones, that all of a sudden saw a great open door into the illegal making of these distilled spirits, and so then in early, just as soon as Prohibition, and in fact they said the day of, they have documentation, people started to get into the black market of making alcohol.
Supply and demand.
Yeah, that's right. So the 1920s, you had the Al Capones that made fortunes on the black market of alcohol.
They made everybody a criminal.
That's right.
They did.
That's right. And so then, you know, I think whenever I think of Prohibition, then I think of St. Valentine's Day massacres. I think of all the illegal things that were going on. And again, it didn't stop alcohol, did it? But it drove it underground.
And it made it very, very expensive. And it was dangerous to get. So they made a lot of money off of it. Just like anything that's going to go black market.
Right.
As soon as they outlaw it, the price is going to go through the roof.
And that's what happened during Prohibition. It was repealed when Franklin Roosevelt, he came in. In fact, he did go on that he was going to repeal it. And in 1932, when Roosevelt, when he was elected, one of the first things he did was repeal it. And so again, so it went from 1919 to 1932. And then all of a sudden in 1932, when it was made legal, then the Moonshiners again took another hit.
And that's why we see all the, I don't know if you've seen them, but the 21st Amendment liquors. I'll mention that in my classroom, you know, that's why it's named that, and kids don't, they never put it together. They said, wow, I didn't know that's why it was called that.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
We could spend a show just on talking about Prohibition years, but we just don't have the time, Bros. I want to get to Ron here in just a minute. But guys, why do you think, why did people start making moonshine? And I'm going to throw what I think is the #1 reason, or maybe not the #1, but one of the top ones, and see what you guys think and throw yourself into it. I just saw where the people didn't like government control in the alcohol trade.
Yep.
Would you agree or disagree with that statement?
As an economics teacher, for me, it has all to do with economics. In fact, Ron and I were discussing the economic side of it right before, is that you don't waste anything.
Nope.
So they have all these crops. What are you going to do with it? The only way for you to save it is to put it into liquid form. And Ron was telling me some stories about, you know, that's how these people made their money.
Yeah.
There wasn't much Social Security. I mean, most of them people was in their 70s and 80s, and that was their way to make money.
Yeah. Some people actually, of the stories I've read, and about everybody has some moonshining stories that I found out, but this is how some people actually survived.
Yep, sure did.
In the time of the Depression.
Right. And
was by the making of moonshine.
When you were talking about it exploding during the Civil War, well, a lot of that had to do with money also, is that these men were off, and you know what it was like. These guys didn't get paid. Right. If they did get paid, it was very...
$13 a month, if they got that.
If they got anything.
A month, right.
Well, a lot of those women, what they lived on was selling the moonshine. That's all they had left.
You're talking $50 a gallon.
Yeah.
That's good money.
That was good money.
That's 4 months' pay for a gallon's worth of work.
That's good money.
They didn't like all these taxes. They felt infringed upon by the government on that. They didn't like it. This was the only way that some of them just could survive or make. I saw where I read testimonials actually where that's the only way that the farmers could survive a bad year. Was by the making of moonshine.
Well, when it's pennies a bushel, but $60 a gallon.
There was actually. It seemed like there was a higher cash value, like you guys were talking about, on their corn and on their apples and all that, if they put it in a distilled form. So that was certainly a reason there too.
Of course, they tried to distill anything. You could make anything.
Oh yeah.
Dandelion wine.
They made their own vodka from potatoes.
Their own vodka
from potatoes.
Watermelon wine, peach.
Raspberry wine, I've seen them make raspberry wine, blackberry wine.
Right, so these are things that was common to the people in the rural areas. The slop, after distilling, was given to the pigs, and so this was another way that they didn't waste anything, but they was given to the pigs, so this was another thing that the farmers used.
Could have made some good bacon.
Nice and tender.
Made some good bacon for those hogs.
I guess. All right. So there are certainly the reasons involved there. It became a very emotional issue with a lot of people, has over all the years, and it still is of today. But moonshining has been a part of our culture and our fabric. Well, I started asking some people. I said, if you got any moonshining stories, I'd like to hear them. And my guest here, Ron, we went out, and he said he knew a place, and he's going to tell a story. He knew a place that they made moonshine, and he's got some stories. And the pictures that in fact, you're seeing right now on the these are from that Sunday afternoon, Ron. We went looking for the hills and the stills of southern Indiana.
Yes, we did.
Kind of pick it up from there, Ron. Tell us a little bit about the people are seeing these pictures of our little trek that day, but tell us about this story.
It was surprising that we found the house.
It really was.
Because I remember being up on top of that hill, and it was an old rundown house. We knew it'd be that way now. The last time I was there, I was 18. And you can buy a bottle of beer for $1, you know, but moonshine. but when we went around that hill, I knew it was up on that hill, but we couldn't see it.
Yeah.
You could just barely see the roof of it. And of course, you were going to climb the mountain.
Well,
but we decided to drive around to it.
You know, I've always been that kind of. I'm just.
He was so excited, he took off running.
I jumped before I think, and so I saw that up there. I thought, "Oh, good, we're going to get up." And so I started climbing up there. You guys, you and my wife are a little smarter than I am, so you started looking for a road. But go ahead.
I knew there was a road there.
Yeah, and there was a road there. Yeah.
My dad had a '59 Buick, and it took everything that Buick had to get to the top of that hill. And it was, you seen that when I had a 4-wheel drive, and it took everything we had to get up there.
I don't know how he got up there.
He got up there
he
with
must
59
have really
Buick.
hit that in
Sure
high gear, didn't he, to get up that hill?
And,
or low gear, I guess. To get
we
up
found
there,
the road, and we drove right up to it.
Yeah.
And he was as tickled as Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And there was the old house.
Yeah.
And what's funny was you was talking about the pigs. I told you where that old hog house was, and that's what he had that for. Everything he used, and he didn't use, the waste of it went to them hogs.
So the making of moonshine in there at this house, and this house, again, was across the Lawrence County border into Martin County. This is where this had, not too far over though, wasn't it?
No, it was maybe 2 miles into Martin County.
Right.
Yep.
And what I remember about that is that it was up on a hill too.
It's a good lookout. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, this guy made moonshine.
Yep.
Now, how did you know he made moonshine?
I never seen the still, but if you remember that house that day, there was a basement in it. And I think that old shed I set outside, there was something underneath that shed too. But Dad had bought it, and I told you the story about how he brought a jug of it home, left it in the glove box. And it was in the summertime. Well, we heard an explosion the next day, and that's what it was. And that thing blew the glove box right off the car, 59 Buick.
The moonshine that he left in there?
Oh, yeah. It was in the summertime. We heard an explosion, and we thought, what the heck went out there? And that whole car was covered with glass, and the glove box was blown off. So you just didn't leave it out in the sun.
Yeah.
It's basically forked. It was.
Yeah.
But, it was funny. You seen some, my brother, I talked to him on the phone, I was telling you a couple days ago.
Yeah.
We was 10 and 12 and 13 years old, and we seen some of the awfulest fights you ever seen. Oh, they get all boozed up, but they was ready to go at it.
Tell us about that, Ron. Again, you know, you're only 12 or 13 years old.
Oh,
you're
yeah.
going up in this old car.
Oh, yeah.
Your dad is trying to make a purchase here.
Oh, yeah.
Of moonshining. Do you happen to remember anything? You probably were too young to remember this, but at the cost, what the cost would have been, or anything, or how was it sold? Was it in glass containers? How was the moonshine sold?
He had it in the jars.
It was in the jars.
Yeah,
was
he had it in the jars.
Like
yep.
Okay.
That's what they drink out of.
And there's a reason why I've got the jars. I'm going to tell them here for a minute.
And they all went in the house. We never did go in the house. He never let us go in the house. We sat outside because we knew what was going to happen. It wouldn't take no time. They all get boozed up and they start fighting.
And so was there a lot of people there?
Yeah, there's usually the house was pretty well packed.
So you're talking about 15 people,
yeah, probably
20 people?
10 or 15 people.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, was this a weekend type of thing on a Saturday night, or did they know that the brew was ready during that
It was there
certain time?
24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So this would have been well known with the people there in that area, that this house there, and this guy was a
everybody
moonshiner.
around there knew he was a moonshiner and a bootlegger.
Yeah.
And that's where everybody bought their booze.
So he probably had a good clientele came in from all the way around.
Yeah.
Like I said, Ron, that it was up on a hill, so they had a good lookout.
Oh, yeah.
It would have a hard time getting up that hill without being spotted.
Yes, and they seen that too. And you was talking about the creek and the water, right there it was.
Yeah.
And the wells was always deep there.
Well, it's also a good spot because, like you said, it was the hills of Martin County, but it was close to Lawrence County.
Yeah.
So the Lawrence County police wouldn't touch him.
Good
Right.
point.
And the
Good
Martin
point.
County police had to go a long way to get
exactly
there.
right.
Good point.
Yeah.
So
That is a good point.
And the house, actually, the road covered both sides. Remember that?
That's right.
You come around one side and you drove all the way around to the other side. So it was actually where they could see all the way around it.
Nice.
So they knew that.
So if they actually were being raided, did you ever hear where they actually ever were raided or
Never
not?
touched. I think there was just too much of a clientele to be touched.
Well, what I'm reading
many
is
people
at
liked it.
times that there was some money that was exchanged to kind of make
product.
sure that
Oh, yeah.
that there was some you overlooked
Yeah.
certain areas.
Well, you got to remember the 60s.
Yeah, yeah,
So the money was tight.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your dad and you all were up there. You sat out there, watched the fights
Oh,
on a
yeah.
Saturday night,
Yep.
and come back. Were you scared?
No, we seen too much of it. We seen it. My dad was like that. He took us places most people never seen.
Uh-huh.
And you just didn't think nothing about it. We got close to the car. We didn't get too close to the house. When it got crazy, we got behind the car. Yeah, it was funny. I sat and talked to my brother about this the other day, and we laughed about it because we did.
You got out of the car.
Oh, yeah, and we just kind of stood around the car with the radio on.
And so when the fighting broke out,
We got on the other side of the car.
Yeah.
You didn't know if it was going to be a gunshot.
Did you actually ever hear any gunfire?
No, we seen some knifing. I mean, we seen people get stabbed and people hit bottles, but
Yeah.
that was about it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was something. Yeah.
Okay, so then you went down the hill. I know it's easier getting down the hill.
Oh, yeah.
And back. So
Yeah.
did you go there often?
Oh, it seemed like more in the summer than any time. Of course, they all sit on the porch and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, we went there probably once a month with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so and this must have been again a pretty popular place. If there
It
were
was
people
popular.
there all the time, this is
Yeah.
how this guy made his money.
Yep.
From selling moonshine.
And like I said, he had chickens out there and had them hogs and everything just ran loose. Dogs on the porch.
Yeah, and
It looked
by
like
the-
something you see in Tennessee.
I'm glad you brought that up because we're going to discuss it in a future show. But moonshiners love their dogs.
Yep.
And
Oh,
again, because the dogs are going to bark.
Alarm.
Yeah, it's going to be alarm.
Yeah.
So the moonshiners love their dogs.
Yep.
And so this was very important to them. And so
Sure
he had
was.
his dogs there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
2 or 3 big old dogs on the porch.
Yeah.
They wouldn't bite you, but they let you know if anybody was coming.
Okay.
You know? Yeah.
Well, when Ron and my wife and I, we walked all around the house and inside the house, and there isn't much of that house left, but I know it brought back a lot of memories,
Oh, yeah.
Ron. But I started looking around, and folks, you see these 2 bottles here. Now, I've got a ball and a cur bottle, and these mason jars we found there at the site.
Yeah.
Now, again, when you're looking for old moonshining stills, some of the things you're looking for is discarded things, and this is one of the things that you're looking for when you're looking for old stills. If you go up in the hills and hollers and you're looking for an old still, you may see some cracked glasses and stuff like this, but we actually found these bottles. Now, like I say, folks, I can't say that there was moonshine was ever in these bottles. There could have been green beans or pickles in them, I don't know. But at this moonshine establishment, I
I'd
found
have to
2
think they
mason
were.
jars.
Yeah.
It's a good
Yeah.
Indiana connection there with the bar jar.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
For Ball State.
Yeah.
The-
That's true. So again, are these moonshine? They could be, but we certainly found this at a place where the old steel.
Yes,
You
it
got
was.
anything else before we close up? You remember
No.
about that? Yeah. Good.
That was about it.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
exciting.
But that kept your attention as an
Oh,
old, as
yeah.
a 12-year-old kid,
Yes, it
didn't it?
did.
That ingrained it right.
Yeah.
But there was you actually got to see the pictures of actually one of the moonshining stills. They were not only made in the caves and the hills, but they actually in houses and basements in town, as we're going to see a little bit later, and in out of town. And the pictures we showed you was one of the moonshining stills, and just across Lawrence County and Martin County.
Yep.
Well, thank you for that story, Randy.
You're
Already our time's gone. It always goes by so
It does.
quick. And
It
again,
does.
I want to thank you guys for coming.
I feel like I had one heck of a good history lesson here from this teacher.
Well, that's what we hope.
That was good. I've never-
hope
That's all,
that you
that's all I
did.
got.
Really good.
That's all I got.
That's all, Randy. Yeah, we hope that you all did learn something about moonshining and the effect of American history and the effect on people in southern Indiana. Because, folks, there's a lot of stories out there. Get on the Indiana History Project, like it. Send me your stories or send me some emails. We want to hear some more. Randy, again, we got a couple more shows to do, my
Yes, we
friend.
do.
On it,
Yes,
but,
we do.
but let's wait to see how the community responds. Ron, thank you.
welcome.
We enjoyed your story about your
was-
personal testimony of the moonshining and
It was good.
and getting out there, and we
Yeah.
enjoyed it very much. Folks, you've been hearing the first show on the history of moonshining in southern Indiana. We've got 2 more coming your way. I think you're going to find it fascinating. We hope you do. It's been a lot of fun. This has been the Indiana History Project. I'm the old history hunter, Norm Taylor, with my co-host, the young social study teacher from Brownstown High School, Randy Greene, with my guest, Ron Hensen. And it's been good being with you. We'll be seeing you soon.